and with the greatest exposure to the virus. We don't just talk about vaccine equity. We've designed our entire system around it, setting aside 40% of vaccines to the most impacted communities. Vaccine equity is not just the right thing to do, it's also the fastest way through this pandemic. Grocery workers prioritize, school staff prioritize, farm workers put to the front of the line, like 85-year-old Maria. I met her in Fresno. She's from Reedley, California. She came to this country from Mexico decades and decades ago to find a job in our fields. Maria said she was unsure. She was uncertain about getting vaccinated. But after she received her shots, she's now educating other farm workers about the safety and the efficacy of the vaccine, helping them overcome similar anxieties. That's the beauty of California. Leadership like Maria's, it isn't ordained, it's earned. We've built a vaccination system where the only constraint now is simply manufactured supply. And thanks to the Biden administration, those doses are on their way. I've had the privilege over the course of the last many weeks to travel all across the state. I've had the chance to see firsthand the strength of communities banding together in Coachella, in Arvin, in Camarillo, and Stockton, stepping up to vaccinate the most vulnerable and the too often overlooked. Every Californian will have access to convenient shots, including those that are homebound and those who don't have transportation or don't have the internet. And now, with greater supply, we're starting to realize the old challenge is going to emerge. And that's the challenge as old as the vaccine themselves. And that's hesitancy about whether to get it in the first place. Just ask Maria. And to address those concerns, we've invested in a large network of trusted community partners, and they're helping us spread the word in many languages and across many different cultures. Vaccines are safe. Vaccines are effective. Vaccines will save your life, allowing you to visit your parents again, go to your daughter's basketball game, show up for shift work without fearing an infection. It was a year ago that we made that incredibly difficult decision to issue that stay-at-home order to slow the spread. We agonized about it. We agonized about the sacrifices that it would require. But we made sure that science, not politics, drove our decisions. And as experts like Dr. Fauci said, it was the right thing to do. People are alive today because of the public health decisions we made. Lives saved because of your sacrifice. Even so, I acknowledge that it's made life hard. It's made life unpredictable, and you're exhausted by all of it. And for the millions of Californians pushed out of the workplace, pushed out the workforce, and those essential workers with no choice but to keep showing up, you are the ones we fight for, because your future and our brighter future depends on it. We continue to work every single day to safely reopen our economy, guided by equity principles, accounting for vaccines and moving as fast as we can, though always mindful that we can't let down our guard, particularly with so many of these new variants. As of today, 24 of our 58 counties are out of the most restrictive tier, and many more are poised to move next week. And as we safely reopen, we're also mindful that we need to do more to provide financial relief. Just a few weeks ago, we took action, working with legislative leaders for immediate stimulus to millions and millions of Californians. We just directed $7.6 billion back to hardworking Californians and small businesses hit hardest by COVID. We didn't wait for Washington. We acted with urgency. And that included the Golden State stimulus, which will put $600 directly in the pockets of millions of families, no matter, by the way, what their immigration status is. It included supporting our essential workers with new childcare subsidies, more funding for food banks and diapers, as well as financial assistance to farm workers. We'll keep the dream alive, but not only for our families, but for all those small businesses who fought so hard to survive over the past year. It's that special mix of audacity, human capital, and creativity found only in California. That means there's literally no better place to do business. California is where garages are the launch pads for world-changing industries. And anyone with the telltale tenacity of a small business owner can create their own California dream, but only if we nurture them. And that's why we're providing the largest small business grant program in the nation, $2.6 billion, up to $25,000 for small businesses and nonprofits impacted by the pandemic. And behind these grants, there are countless stories of entrepreneurs and the dreams they've pursued with every ounce of energy that they have. Like Francisco in Fresno, who received $5,000 to reopen his pastry business after being closed for nearly 6 months. And Katara, right here in LA, whose dessert cafe used a $15,000 grant to make payroll. And 40,000 other businesses and counting, barbershops and repair shops and clothing shops throughout our state. 3/4, by the way, of these grants have gone to minority, women, and veteran-owned businesses, and those serving in rural as well as low-income communities. We're not just talking about equity, we're building it into the very fabric of all of our programs. Now, there's nothing more foundational to an equitable society than getting our kids safely back into the classrooms. Remote learning, it's exacerbated the gaps we've all been working so hard to close. Our kids are missing too many rites of passage, field trips and proms and graduations, teachers pulling triple duty as counselors, curriculum developers, tech specialists, parents desperate for reopening dates. Look, Jen and I, we live this as parents of 4 young children, helping them cope with the fatigue of what my youngest son calls Zoom school. The loneliness of missing their friends, frustrated emotions they don't even yet fully understand. In December, it was not that long ago, in December, as COVID was surging, many schools were contemplating an alarming decision, giving up completely on in-person instruction for the rest of the school year. In just a few months since, working together with parents and teachers and school leaders, we've turned the conversation from whether to reopen to when. Every day, every single day, more and more schools are announcing reopening dates. In fact, almost 7,000 schools are now open or plan to reopen by mid-April for in-person instruction. 7,000. But California has about 11,000 schools in over 1,000 school districts spread across 58 counties, all locally controlled. So we're not going to be satisfied until everybody is safely back in the classroom. And to achieve this, well, we've delivered 3 months worth of PPE to every single school. We've directly enabled schools to provide routine COVID testing, especially for low-income students. And starting last week, California promised that at least 10% of all of our vaccine allocation will go directly to teachers and school staff. And in the first week alone, we've already administered more than 210,000 doses to educators, a pace more than double our goal. And just last week, working with the legislature, we committed $6.6 billion. $6.6 billion for learning loss, for tutoring, for mental health, and the ability to extend school days and the flexibility to extend the school year. We can do this. The science, it's sound. We start with the early grades, we build confidence, and we build up from there. Look, getting kids back to school, getting shots into arms, getting the economy back on its feet, these are urgent priorities, but they're not the totality of our efforts. And we entered this pandemic with a care economy suffering from decades and decades of underinvestment, a societal scourge that the first partner has shined a light on. Working women, particularly women of color, earning only a fraction of what their male counterparts earn, widening gaps between the haves and the have-nots. California's most acute pre-existing condition remains income inequality. So as we respond to this pandemic, we need to stay fixated on closing these unacceptable disparities. That's one of the fundamental reasons I ran for governor in the first place. And by any measure, we're making great strides. Just consider this. We've rewarded working families by nearly tripling the earned income tax credit, increasing childcare subsidies, and adding 2 more weeks of paid family leave, as well as raising the minimum wage to $14 on its way to $15 an hour. We're providing the first ever healthcare subsidies for middle-class Californians so they can afford coverage. And we're increasing student financial aid as well as public assistance. We're making community college. This has gotten lost in all the conversations, making community college free for 2 years, creating opportunity for all. But I'm mindful that we aren't really addressing the needs of all people in poverty unless we account for the biggest pressure most families face. That's the issue of housing, in particular housing stability. And so we crafted the strongest eviction controls in the nation, protecting millions of renters from losing their homes in the midst of this pandemic, and provided a framework for billions and billions of dollars in rental support for struggling landlords, all while remaining laser focused on the most severe part of the housing crisis, homelessness. This is a crisis predating the pandemic. In response, we have developed brand new solutions, including 2 programs promoted by the Biden administration as a model to the other 49 states. Project Roomkey was launched in April, and it's provided over 35,000 homeless Californians with a safe shelter from COVID. And HomeKey, that was launched just in July, that's created more than 6,000 new permanent housing units during this pandemic, buying hotels and motels, converting them at 1/3 of the cost of traditional supportive housing. We did this cheaper. We did this faster than homeless housing has ever been built in the history of our state, literally rewriting the book on how to tackle homelessness. And while we acted swiftly during this pandemic, we are mindful. None of us are naive. We are mindful that these tent cities on our sidewalks, these encampments along our freeways, they simply remain unacceptable. And so our challenge moving forward is crystal clear: to continue our immediate progress while focusing on our longer-term goals. By the way, many of those I laid out in detail in last year's State of the State. Now, bringing that same spirit of innovation behind Roomkey and HomeKey, we're committing this year to nearly $2 billion to create more housing for our homeless this year, addressing mental health at the same time, as well as substance abuse issues, and ending homelessness one person at a time. No one's denying that this isn't a huge challenge, but we know what it means to stare down big challenges. In 2020, we simultaneously faced 2 once-in-a-generation crises. And when we combated the worst wildfire season in our state's history in the middle of the pandemic, the fact is the hots are getting hotter, the dries are getting drier, and it's not just here in California, but all across the globe. Let's call it what it is: climate change. Just as we approach COVID, we are guided by science. Just consider last summer's heat dome over the entire west coast of the United States, which led to world record-breaking temperatures here at home. And in just one 24-hour period last August, 12,000 lightning strikes sparked 560 wildfires, requiring heroic efforts by our firefighters and National Guard, who landed helicopters into flames to save fellow Californians. This year, we're budgeting more than $1 billion for fire prevention, including fuel breaks, forest health, and home hardening. We forged an historic partnership with the U.S. Forest Service to radically ramp up forest management efforts, reducing barriers on hundreds of fuel reduction projects and prescribed burns, adding 30 new fire crews and pre-positioning assets, new C-130s, new Black Hawk helicopters, and new radar technology. But historic wildfires, they're the symptom. Greenhouse gases, they're the cause. And to address them, we must confront the source of more than half of the emissions in our state, and that's transportation. And I was proud to sign groundbreaking executive order just last year requiring that all new cars and passenger trucks sold in California be zero emissions by 2035. And the car companies led by Ford, GM, Volvo, and others seized the opportunity to innovate, create jobs, and dominate the industry of the future, proving yet again that protecting our planet, protecting it, and growing our economy, they're not conflicting goals. They're one in the same. Look, there's no doubt that California is the pace setter of environmental policy. Yet we're also mindful of our responsibility to do even more. It's really that restless spirit that I think defines California. We know there's no advancement without effort, no success of any type without sacrifice. To paraphrase St. Francis, the patron saint of my hometown, now is the time to tell the world about our brighter future. And only if necessary will we use words. See, we know that our strength comes not from what we preach, but from what we do. From our people who get their hands dirty each and every day, who come home tired and do it all to give their kids a better life. When we set our minds to it, California could truly reach the stars. It's just a few weeks ago, a NASA rover, appropriately named Perseverance, landed safely on Mars 293 million miles away. It was a breakthrough achievement made possible by the engineers and scientists at our very own Jet Propulsion Lab in Pasadena, led in part by the vision and drive of a Lebanese immigrant who was educated in California schools and rose to become the head of JPL. By the risk-taking that's in our DNA, and by the dream to discover new frontiers, by the sheer force of will. It was an achievement made possible by California. And it tells you everything you need to know about who we are and what we can be. But California isn't the world's best place by birthright. We have to earn it each and every day. In our hopeful vision of a brighter future, it's the basis for the decisions we make today. We place faith over fear, optimism over pessimism. The power truly is in our hands. This is our moment to create the California we all want to live in, to extend the dream of prosperity, of equity, and progress to all, and to continue to lead the world into the future once more. Thank you, all of you, and take care, and good night.